Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. I want to talk about this Andrew Wilson destroying a room full of feminists. Um with that being said, let's get it. Tap the screen, tap the screen, tap the screen. Shout out to Didi.
What's up, YouTube? It's your girl Dee Dee. Welcome back to the channel. So I am back with another reaction video. Now this video comes from Rachel Wilson. The title of this is like her modern day debate, where she's debating whether feminism was a reaction to oppression of women. So we hear about feminism all the time and how it's affected a lot of women, especially in modern culture and modern times. So I think this video is going to be very interesting. Before we get into the video, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, comment, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell to be notified when I upload new content or go live, you guys. Let's get into it. Here we go.
Okay, the first topic is feminism was not a reaction to oppression. Hi, nice to meet you too.
I guess a natural first question is what you think it arose from.
So, the story most everyone's heard is that the reason feminism came about is because the evil patriarchy was oppressing
And this
women,
is Andrew Wilson's wife, ladies and
We're
gentlemen.
being oppressed. We have to march and, protest until we're equal.
Right.
That's really not how it happened at all. It was more of an astroturfed social engineering project by radical revolutionaries and wealthy industrialists.
So I'm just going to be honest, I don't know enough about the history of feminism to say whether you're right or wrong. So I guess I kind of would get to the meat of what I'm assuming you're saying, which is that feminism is inherently wrong, right? Because it wasn't founded by oppressed women, it was founded by some other, corrupt industry.
That, and people just have this assumption because of over 100 years of propaganda that women were
Talk about it.
oppressed, when I don't think that's accurate at all. I don't think there's any real evidence that women were oppressed compared to men, for instance.
She's right. That is the major
Talk about it.
assumption that most of us had, that, women were majorly oppressed. They couldn't do this, they couldn't do that at a certain time, to where it forced women to want to revolt against men and start their own movement to create equal rights that would include women and which, would render them less oppressed. So that's the notion that we all have gotten from it, without really knowing the history behind it and not really looking into what really happened and how it started. So that is something, yes, propaganda over the years have convinced us that that's what it was, and that's what people go with, and anything outside of that, people push back on it without really going investigating and then investigating the actual truth behind it. You know what I mean? Let's continue.
So what about parts of our history where there were just objectively unequal rights, like voting, for instance?
So in the West, most men only gained the right to suffrage maybe a decade or so before women did. So people assumed that as soon as we had, various forms of democracy, either in America or England, that all men could vote. That's not the case. It was a very small group of men. There were a lot of caveats. It depends the time and place. You had to either be a landowner, you had to have certain other various requirements. Sometimes you had to pay a poll tax in order to be able to vote.
Yeah.
So in England, for example,
I heard
men
about
only gained
that.
universal suffrage about a decade before
Tap the
women
screen,
did.
tap the screen, tap the screen. Tap the screen, tap the
I
screen,
don't
tap
think
the
so, but
screen.
that's a separate prompt.
Well, and I thought this was interesting because I didn't know that, and the fact that, there were, it wasn't just women that couldn't vote, but men couldn't vote as well. And you have to have certain things that you attain in order to be able to vote. It just wasn't the fact that, all men could vote and all women couldn't. You know what I mean? There were, she said, a small percentage of men that were able to attain the things necessary to put themselves in a position to be able to vote. But they had to do something, and it wasn't all men. So that's very interesting to know, but I think a lot of people don't know that. And I think with a lot of things, people are oblivious to the history, and once again, they just go on propaganda, and this is why I say what is perceived becomes actuality. Perception is everything when you don't know the truth. So somebody can just spin a narrative, put something out there, make you believe it, and that becomes reality for most. And everybody just believes
Tap the screen, tap the screen, tap the screen.
Years and years thinking
Tap the screen, tap the screen, tap the screen.
a certain way, and then when you really find out that is not actually the way it's been or how it goes, then people revolt and they get mad because they're like, how could it not be the truth? No, people can
tap the screen, tap the screen, tap the screen,
that kind of skewer
tap the screen,
the truth,
tap the
right?
screen.
Or to make you believe something that isn't the case. And they know a lot of people are not going to research it or go look deep for it. They're just going to take what's being given to them and run with it. So that's why when people who actually research these things and pull up the truth, they get mad. People get mad instead of saying, oh, wow, instead of accepting it and going check. Because now you can look this up for yourself. You don't have to be oblivious to anything. You can go look up the truth yourself. But people are so indoctrinated into accepting what has been given, it's difficult for them to imagine that they could have been lied to. You know what I mean? Let's continue.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I don't really know where to go from there then, because, again, regardless of the circumstances by which feminism arose, is kind of indifferent to me. This is kind of similar to conversations like I had earlier, as far as, like, religion, for example, in society, right? It's more about the effects of it. And so, regardless of the circumstances of how feminism arose, I think that the effects of it are probably
that's way too
I think
straight.
the effects are deeply disadvantageous to both men and women. I think women, if your concern is for women, we were better off prior to our liberation from the evil patriarchy. If you look at every metric that we have to assess women's happiness and well-being in modern times, it's lower than it was prior to when they started tracking this.
Yeah, that's actually true.
I think there's a problem with the data tracking there, right? I don't know this figure specifically, but I mean, we have a lot less forces in our military than we also did back in like the 1800s, right? So I think that.
Well, let me ask you, what do you think it did for women? Why do you think, or for anyone, what do you think the advantages are? Why was it good?
Well, I think specifically just giving equal footing and opportunity to women, which I don't think is even entirely fulfilled at this point, but I'm sure that I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the traditional, female role.
What opportunities did they not have?
Well, voting for one. But, even in the workplace,
men
right?
couldn't vote either for the most part.
Your gut is more
Hold
balanced
on.
and resilient thanks to Fluorosol
Come on.
probiotics.
Origin, packed with whole grain nutrition.
But either for the most part.
But that's the only thing that they keep coming up with, voting. What else? And then
Yeah, what else y'all got besides voting?
But it's not a whole list of things that they can bring up and say that women couldn't do versus
Tap the screen.
men. Let's continue.
So I think that this is, just because it was a wrong before that for men doesn't mean that it still was unequal.
So do you think that we would have the welfare state without female voters? Do you think the welfare state is a good thing?
I don't understand the question. I apologize.
So would we have massive entitlement spending? Would we have food stamps? Would we have open borders and all these perks for immigrants coming in where they're getting free housing and healthcare and food if it weren't for female voters?
I think you still would. I don't think female voters necessarily have to sway those things, but I also...
The data says that overwhelmingly they are the most reliable voting bloc for all types of entitlements, especially
That's true.
Open borders and immigration.
Government assistance.
If you go back, though, historically, right, and again, I didn't know the topic, so I don't have any literature to, literally support this, but women had a lot of influence in the House, even when they couldn't vote, right?
Exactly.
But we gave the ability to women to express their own independent votes. They are a vote. And so if, let's just say you're right, that women are a major proponent for, policies we see in immigration, who cares? They're still a part of our populace. They get to have a say on this.
If you're a woman and you're living in New York City or other places where there's tons of illegal immigration and you're now being subjected to disproportional amounts of violence that you weren't subjected to
That's
before.
not true.
Lies.
Go ahead and substantiate that.
Yeah, so immigrants, illegal immigrants specifically, if you obviously remove the illegal part of the immigration, literally just commit crimes at lower rates than national.
So you think that all the Mexican gangs...
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
And she was getting ready to cook.
Hello.
And bring up something.
Well, surprise,
that made
surprise.
sense.
I agree with Wilson. But is it fair to, since we agree on feminism specifically, is it fair to shift to women voting specifically?
Well, there's going to be a few prompts along those
Is
lines.
this
So the
thing like
first one is
Jubilee or
just
what?
that feminism was not a reaction to oppression of women by men.
Yeah, I think a lot of people agree with that. Again, I think that's.
I'd say
There's
the
a lot of
vast
people that
majority
don't.
of people don't agree that that's the case. And they would say, well, if that's the case, why do we have it? You know, how did we get it if it wasn't a reaction to some kind of
It's
oppression?
the same way we still have feminism today. That people can be wrong, and a lot of people can be wrong. I think a lot of people. I don't. It seems like you present that as like, oh, people are going to disagree with me.
They do, all the time, every day. So every gender studies professor in every major university would disagree
Hold
with
on.
me. And they would say that the reason feminism and women's liberation activism was necessary was because there were certain aspects where women were oppressed by men.
Sure, but don't you think, especially with the last election, it's shown that the opinions that unfortunately absolutely were infiltrated by these types of professors and throughout society, doesn't that show that there was the silent majority, a lot of people didn't really want to go along with it, but they were too scared to be on the wrong side of history or whatever, and that now that we're starting to see, oh, there's a lot more people who are
Okay, here we go.
just see, yeah, obviously feminism is this, obviously pride parades are too crazy, all that stuff.
Well, if you agree with me on the prompt, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to argue with you, but
I agree. That's
Yeah.
But I didn't make the prompt. You made the prompt.
right. But if you don't disagree with me on the prompt, am I supposed to change the prompt or change my position or change my? You could challenge me on something else, I suppose.
Well, I did, but you said you would do a prompt.
You said that.
So, okay,
What's
well
your
then- so
proposition?
what-
Is that
what-
people do agree with me? Do you think that the vast
Yeah,
majority
I-
of people think
yeah.
that feminism was not a reaction to
I
oppression?
don't know. I don't know what people think about the origins, but I think it's far more common that people be like, I don't really know the origins, but wherever.
Yeah, people don't know the origins, but most people will disagree how feminism came about. They would disagree that it was not due to women being oppressed. So most people will disagree and say, absolutely, feminism came about because women were oppressed. Women were oppressed by men, and this is what brought about feminism.
Welcome.
That's what most people would agree with. So when you
Tap
say
screen,
that is actually not the
please.
case, women were
Welcome.
majorly oppressed by men, and that is not how feminism came about. Most people would disagree with that. But let's continue.
But it's today, like it definitely wasn't this, and I'll say, even anecdotally, even calling myself an atheist, I've been thinking about that title in the same way as feminism. Like if you see just an average woman today, and she says, "I care about the equality of the genders," like, you wouldn't call, oh, you're a feminist.
Yes, I would.
Well,
Feminism-
maybe you would, but again, the average person believes that there should be equality of the genders. And so when you're like, feminist,
I don't think
it's when you're
equality of
talking
the
about,
genders is
men
possible.
are this, or, I need 9 months of. That's the understanding that people have when we use that word. I think you're underestimating the amount of people who do see through all the BS that has held up until very recently.
Why do you think that was oppression? Because one
in the
group
loosest
couldn't
term,
vote.
it's just the government not allowing you to do something. Is that not?
Yeah, the government didn't allow lots of people to do lots of things. So I don't see how you could say that this is an example that women are
Oppression isn't the end of the necessary.
I don't even think
I
it
agree, but
amounts to
but we agree
oppression.
that was oppression.
I don't agree that that was
So
oppression
the
at all.
government saying that people cannot vote in the country they live is not oppression.
No, because this country was never founded with universal suffrage. It was never intended to be something where one person, one vote was the way that they did things. It was supposed to be people with stake in the game.
How would you characterize that notion of a person living in a country and they can't be part of the decision?
Right now, there's a lot of things I don't have any participation in the decision making. There's a lot, like during COVID restrictions, for example, I had no say, you had no say. The things were dictated to us from the top down.
I just got my 30 seconds. So what would you call that aspect? I live in a country and I don't have, that's called, it's not oppression, it's
just not oppression is a very specific thing. It means that you're intentionally being held down.
Right.
okay, so then
Right.
it's that.
I don't think it's holding you down. You can still live your life and do what you want.
Right.
You don't need
A lot of people don't vote and still live their lives.
voting isn't necessary to, you know, quality of life or freedom at all, really. You as a woman not being able to vote does not equal you being oppressed.
She's right. I agree with her. You know, but it's like they'll use anything to try to continuously push that narrative. Even to this day, like I said, women still feel they don't have equal rights to a man in some cases. They still argue that point to this day when there's nothing holding you back from doing what men do.
Fact.
Some will still argue
Tap the screen,
that there
tap
are
the
things in
screen,
place that
please.
are holding
Tap the
them
screen,
back
tap
from
the
doing what men
screen.
can do when they really don't want to do what men can do. For real. So you know, they still argue those same points, but it doesn't fly because nobody's holding you back. You can make whatever choice. You can choose to be at home, be a housewife if you can do that. You can choose to go to work. You can choose to get a job, start a business. Nothing's stopping you from doing that. It's easy. It's much more easier for you to do these things now than ever, and nothing's stopping you from doing it. But somehow there are people who still like to tout the idea of, oh, women are oppressed and we don't have any rights, and that's just untrue. But let's continue.
If feminism wasn't a response to oppression, why the hell does feminism exist?
I'll tell you why. There was a small group of radical revolutionaries who felt that the current system prior to this that we had through all of history was inherently oppressive to women because they felt that women and men were equal, that they're basically the same, they just have different reproductive organs, right? And that's really the only difference. They should
Tap
be
screen, tap
anything
screen,
a man
tap
can
screen.
do, a woman should be
Tap
doing.
screen,
If you
tap
look
screen, tap
historically
screen.
at what rights men and women had, I think you could argue men were more oppressed than women prior even to feminism.
Seriously?
Talk
Yes.
about it.
Larry, check this out. With On Deck, we can get a small business loan fast and start hiring more help right away.
Than women prior even to feminism.
Seriously?
Yes, 100%.
Men were, in what way? How were men more oppressed than women?
Well, women haven't ever been conscripted to go fight and die in wars, and especially
Right.
prior to feminism,
Right.
that was a really brutal thing. About 80% of men
Tap screen, tap
historically
screen, tap screen.
have ended up not,
Tap
well,
screen,
no,
tap
60%
screen.
of men historically have never been able to reproduce. They've never had the opportunity, whether it's because they died young as cannon fodder, couldn't get a wife, weren't selected to be married. Women, all you have to do is be fertile, and you're going to have progeny. You're never going to be sent to the front lines in a war that you don't want to fight
Right.
in.
Right.
They don't have to work in coal mines. They don't have to do the dirty, dangerous jobs that men have to do.
Women are very privileged. What does that have
Yes,
to do with
right.
feminism and
Well,
how
it's
it came about?
And I think she's probably about, the first thing comes to mind, okay, you're oppressed as women, but then you're privileged. So how are you being oppressed and privileged at the same time? If you're being oppressed, you're held down, you don't have a say, you do what they tell you to do, that sounds like oppression. Like, hey, you have no say, you're forced to do this, and if you don't, it's going to be a problem, versus you're privileged where you don't have to do these things. You're not even asked to do these things. You're not even put in a position to have to do it. That's a privilege where if you can have babies and reproduce, then you don't have to fight. We're not asking you to do it. You can go and sit on the sidelines and have your baby, and you're exempt from these things. But men didn't have a choice. So oppression means when you don't have a choice to do something that you don't want to do, you have to do it. That is what oppression is, and it does seem like that is what the men have to face. Let's continue.
You can't claim that women are oppressed and also claim that they're privileged.
Definitely were.
Exactly.
Do you dis-
How could they be privileged
Wait,
and be oppressed?
Exactly.
Do you disagree that women were never oppressed?
Yes,
Do you
I agree.
Do you agree? Wait, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that.
Not bad, y'all.
Do you believe that women have never been oppressed?
Yes. I believe that women were never. Yes, as a whole group. Who oppressed them? Who oppressed them? Listen, I saw your thing with Andrew, and you love to do this thing where you're like, but my presupposition, like you've never examined why you believe that. Why do you believe women were oppressed? You tell me why you believe that.
This is literally a historical fact.
It's not a historical
not
fact.
having the right to vote. The women are oppressed currently in this world.
Oh,
right?
explain.
Less
I'd
so.
love to know how. Any
They can't
example?
drive. They can't go out without.
They can't drive?
In certain countries, absolutely, women are oppressed. Are you
Where?
really denying that women are not oppressed in this world? In certain
Well, we're talking
obviously
about
in America, right?
America,
I'm an American.
right?
Women have equal rights, and I think this is a great society. But to suggest that women have not been oppressed in the past.
We're
in this
in,
country,
we're in the
past,
West. Yeah, in this country.
In the past in this country, and throughout the world currently, to suggest
You're
that
being
they're not
vague,
oppressed
sir.
is
Show me an
absurd.
example of
It's absurd.
American women that's not an argument. Show me an example of American women ever being oppressed comparatively to men.
There's a time in this country where women can't vote.
There was time in this country where men couldn't vote.
So
The
what's that?
majority of men could not vote.
That is not a retort. That is just saying, well, that's true. You basically just said that's true, but. So you basically agree with me. I asked you.
How were men oppressing women if those men themselves didn't have the right to vote either? So men with no voting rights oppressed women with no voting rights?
You asked me to give you an example of when women were oppressed, and I did. And
This dude talking out both sides of his damn
men
neck.
were oppressed too.
Yeah, so how
so
could feminism be a reaction to oppression
How
by
is
men?
it not?
Dude,
They
you
were
was
oppressed.
double talking.
Women have always been privileged compared to men, always.
Women?
Throughout all of history, yes. Yes.
Come on.
Like I said, women don't have
Tap
to.
screen,
women
tap
never
screen,
have to
tap
die
screen.
in battle.
Tap screen, tap screen, tap screen.
You could argue that they're even privileged there comparatively to the men.
Stop, you don't believe that.
I do believe that, absolutely. Where in the Middle East and what are you talking about? Are you talking about the Taliban or are you talking about Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia has become very progressive and women there can work and they can drive and...
Go to Afghanistan and tell me that women are privileged.
Well, how are they not?
That's Afghanistan.
It's a rhetorical question. She's asking the same question.
Who are you appealing to here?
The camera.
So, let's just grant you that the Taliban is an oppressive regime.
Literally grant me that they're an oppressive regime? Seriously?
Well, you would have to take into account all the ways that they probably don't.
Okay, I'm back.
What about it?
But let's stick to America because the topic was, it's more here. So, in the United States, women have never been oppressed. Do you know that women have always had higher rates of literacy?
I wish she didn't have to get cut off, that she could just go,
Please repeat the question.
The prompt
This is very interesting.
Feminism or women's liberation was not a reaction to
Women's
oppression.
liberation.
Andrew Wilson. Let me pause this for a second. Andrew Wilson and his wife would be great on Jubilee. These two for Jubilee on Jubilee will be great. I'm just saying.
Could the oppression be of a different form that led to this revolution?
What?
That's logically possible, but you'd have to give me an example or demonstration of how you think that's the case.
Okay. How about the failures of institutions that has occurred? For example, the separation of church and state, the failure of the church to educate these women has allowed them to be victimized by those who obviously...
Diagnosed with cancer
What?
after 2005, it may not be genetic, it may be PFAS. If you've been drinking public...
victimized by those who obviously desire divisions.
Why do you think women weren't allowed to be educated?
Well, I do believe they should have been educated.
They were educated. I was actually just about to tell the guy who sat down before you, women have historically always had higher rates of literacy and high school graduation for as long as we've been tracking in this country, which is about 1790. So we're talking about the early founding of the nation. Women were actually more educated than men, and part of the reason for this is women were the ones that educated children, and they weren't sent off to, work in infrastructure jobs or farming at, 12 or 14 years old the way that men were. They weren't having to go and die in battle or anything like that. So women being at home got more education than most men historically.
Well, and that's what happened historically, but we can all say the same for today. You still have women who are considered more educated than men still. Women carry higher degrees than men. They go to college more than men. And the same could be said today now, and if you go back, the statistics still show that is a real thing, even in today's society. So I see where she's coming from, and it makes sense to me. Because men were, had to go out and do other things that wouldn't allow them to focus on education, but they had to go out and work in the coal mines or wherever they had to work to provide for their families, and then go to war and all of these things. So they really didn't have the time to read books or get educated like women could do, because women were at home. But once again, she's right, they had to teach the kids, so they probably had more access to learning and had the time to do it. The men didn't have time because their obligation was somewhere else. And it kind of rings true today, even in today's society. A lot of men don't even go to college, but they find work doing trades and other things like that, welding, those types of jobs.
Welding, build, construction, stuff like that.
Go to college, but the rates are still higher amongst women. Let's continue.
Now, could that have been corrupted from the beginning? For example, would be beginning, middle, and end of the story. Education begins at a format where you began, depending on the topic that you have a desire to learn, or at least you should have been taught. Could that have been manipulated? Form of education that has occurred and people weren't aware of it, and that in due time this revolution, feminism, was just an expected outcome that could have been prevented but never was addressed.
I really don't know what you mean by that.
What I mean is someone lied to these women.
Oh, yes,
whether it be themselves or maybe a combination of
the propaganda,
another third party that desired their outcomes, just using them as pawns to.
I think that's definitely true, and that's one of my evidences for the fact that feminism was not some kind of grassroots reaction to abusive oppression by the evil patriarchy. So.
Okay, so evil patriarchy. Is there an opposite of evil patriarchy, which is a good patriarchy?
I think we've always had a benevolent patriarchy. I think it's been framed that patriarchy, which just means rule by the father, has always been some kind of evil and nefarious attempt
it's always
to just
meant
run
bad.
women down and make them into slaves, when that was
due to
honestly
feminism.
never the case.
Would you agree that is the role, rules and regulation of the father to guard and protect his daughter? And obviously his wife was being the bearer of his children. Okay, so what...
Hold on. First off, brother, you see, how can a man protect something that he can't control? Shout out to Minister Falcon for that. A man cannot protect what he can't control. And once again, shout out to Louis Farrakhan for that.
If that father got corrupt?
Well, there's always going to be some corruption in hierarchies. It's unavoidable. That doesn't mean the whole hierarchy is bad.
Right.
Okay, so at what point will the whole thing be corrupt?
I think that's kind of a slippery slope type of a fallacy where it'd be pretty hard, or a continuum fallacy where it may be hard for you to prove a point, but my contention is that there was no overall plot, no overall nefarious oppression of women by men as a whole. So if you can tell me where there was...
Well, wouldn't it would be, let's go to Christian ethics, where technically we're at war, technically Christianity at war, a division of good and evil.
Okay, now he wants to take it from propaganda to religious propaganda. In his eyes. How?
You have an opponent that is obviously an essential essence, a living entity, who decided to do evil and desires to breed death and destruction.
So
manipulating certain
women or just
individuals that
people in
say
general?
desire greed and wealth or power, may that be a combination, whether or not, fooled, gullible human beings, well, let's just say women who weren't properly taught, to rebel in different form of ways, like feminism.
Sure.
And there's no safeguarding, because obviously the separation of church and state allowed this, because the church has failed in their own aspect, as well as the nation. They allowed these problems to being stirred.
What?
Well, you could say that the Protestant foundings of the nation and the idea of separation in church of state was a bad idea. Correct. I don't know that that's relevant to the claim that most people make, which is that feminism was simply a reaction to abuses of men oppressing women. So,
well, could the reaction be forthcoming? Could have been forewarned.
What?
negligence may have occurred.
What is this guy talking about?
I don't know what it has to do with
What?
the prompt. Sorry.
Listen, I thought this was
This
an
dude is
interesting video.
lost.
Shout out to Rachel Wilson. I thought this was really good and a great discussion about feminism and how it started. I think this is a good conversation to have because so many people really believe that all of these women were oppressed for years, and this is how feminism came about. And some even will argue you today that women are still oppressed and their rights are being taken away. They don't have the same rights as men, when that is simply not true. I don't agree with that. I don't believe that. Women are doing what they want to do, and nobody's stopping them from doing it. In fact, the things that they, complain about are not really the things that they're really taking advantage of. Women don't go into the fields. You claim that, we can't get the same pay as men for the same jobs, but most women don't want to do the jobs that men majorly do. Not because they can't, because they don't choose to. So you have every right to choose the fields you want to go in, the jobs you want to create. You can do anything that a man can do, but most women don't choose to do it. So I don't buy this idea that women are oppressed and there's somebody somebody stopping them from doing what they want to do. I think they want to keep running with that narrative to become even more privileged and more privilege over men. It's no longer a fight for equality. It's a fight for dominance, in my opinion, when it comes to women. So I want to hear your thoughts on this one. I enjoyed this video.
See y'all later.
Shout out to Rachel. Chime in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts on